Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Cabinet. Good to see some familiar faces back around the table today. As usual, this is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and it will be archived so you can view it afterwards. Would everyone please remember to switch their microphone on before they speak and turn it off when they have finished speaking. Apologies for absence. I have received apologies today from Mrs. Taylor, and I note that Mrs. Richardson will be attending today via Teams. So good afternoon, Louise. Turning to the first item on the agenda, item 1 minutes, pages 3 to 14. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of September 2024 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Item 2, urgent items. I have agreed to take one urgent item, a report on the Leicestershire County Council Lead Local Flood Authority Protocol. This will be taken at item 9 on the agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest in respect of any items on the agenda? No, that's no declarations. Thank you very much, members. Which moves us on to item 4. Our first report today seeks approval of the updated Leicestershire Highway Design Guide and provides an update on the outcome of the public consultation that was undertaken earlier this year. Jana Walker, the Assistant Director of the Environment and Transport, will present the report, and I will then ask Ozzy, as a lead member, to speak. Jana, over to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the updates to the Leicestershire Design Guide following public engagement in summer 2024. Cabinet and also the Environment and Transport Scrutiny Committee have received regular updates on the development of the Design Guide. It's one of the department's key documents that provides guidance for developers on the design of new highway, particularly where it's anticipated that it'll be adopted by the Highway Authority. The guide is a supporting document for our Highways Development Management role as a statutory consultee in the planning process. You'll all be aware as well, there's been quite a few changes to national policy and guidance, including the NPPF and Local Transport Note 120, which is around cycle infrastructure design, that have meant there's been a need to update the design guide. We have had a particular focus during the review on how we can encourage developers and development to create more sustainable highway in the widest sense, so including active travel, things around sustainable drainage systems, green infrastructure and low carbon materials, and also sustainable in a financial sense, not increasing the maintenance burden on the council. The new design guide retains the principle of encouraging developers to seek adoption by the council for new highway, whilst ensuring the assets we adopt are constructed to a high standard with comparably low maintenance, and will continue to seek reasonable contributions towards future maintenance of highway assets through a commuted sums process. So the version of the design guide presented for approval today contains updates resulting from the public consultation you mentioned and regular engagement with stakeholders through the development of the plan or the guide. And certainly the comments we've had have been really helpful in refining the design guide and helping it to be more user friendly. The consultation responses are set out in themes within the report, including feedback from Scrutiny Committee, paragraphs 58 to 84, together with our responses to those, and that there's an appendix with more detail available on those. Whilst the consultation has undoubtedly improved the guide, the fundamental principles haven't changed since the guide was presented to Cabinet for permission to consult or approval to consult. Overall, we now have a guide that reflects current policy and the challenges facing us. And probably a particular note, our new highway development management policy on access, particularly sustainable access for all, and we've developed a toolkit to help us with that. Design and construction guidance, guidance on active travel, new palettes of acceptable materials, and also some clarification around pre-planning technical advice to help transition more from planning into the adoption process. The recommendations also include a delegation to the director to allow the guide to be updated as guidance and challenges change, and to help the guide to keep up to date. You'll probably be aware from previous updates that one of the challenges was it was such a long time since we'd updated the guide. It was quite a substantial piece of work to do so, and the idea is to keep that under more regular review. So the recommendations there are as per the order paper, and that's it from me, Chair.
Thank you, Jana. Ozzy.
Thank you, Chair. I move the report. This is a very important document, the importance of working with developers and working with councils on the highway design guide. I think Jana has really well covered it. I'd like to put on my record thanks to the highways team and Jana's team for actually doing a very good job on this and working working tirelessly to get to where we are. As I say, it's not been updated for a long time, and it took a lot of work to where we got to today. But I can't stress how important this is to work, with developers, etc., to get the right, roads and infrastructure that we require.
Thank you, Ozzy. Robert.
Yeah, I'm happy to second and just reserve my whether to speak or not.
All right, thank you. Blake, you'd like to say something?
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to put on record how pleased I am to see the Value of Trees toolkit included in the new design guide. The council's worked extremely hard and innovatively around the environment in general, more generally, and we know that communities like trees. Previously, I think we've all had in our inbox complaints where trees have been taken out along the highway, particularly where they were due to be planted within new developments, but the species of the trees, the type of trees were inappropriately planted or they weren't the right type. Hopefully this toolkit can address that issue and we can see plenty more trees along the highway, which not only contributes towards our total of 700,000 trees, 1 tree for every resident of Leicestershire, but more importantly, moving forward, will help the environment more generally.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay. Ozzy has proposed it, Robert has seconded. Is that agreed? All in favour? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 5, strategic transport planning issues associated with the emerging Charnwood local plan, pages 373 and 388, and also a supplementary report, pages 1 to 12. The next report presents an update on the issues associated with the emerging Charnwood local plan, including the outcome of recent consultation exercise on the Charnwood Transport Contribution Strategy and the associated implications for the Local Highway Authority and its role as the statutory consultee in the planning process. We've also received a supplementary report which provides a further update on these issues. Attached to the order paper is a response from Richard Bennett, Head of Planning and Growth at Charnwood Borough Council, to Julie Thomas, our Head of Planning, Historic and Natural Environment, marked 5A, and also attached is a letter from Councillor Jewel Meir, as Leader of Charnwood Borough Council, to the Acting Leader of this Council, marked 5B. So Jana Walker will present the report, and I'll start there. Thank you, Jana.
Thank you, Chair. Members may remember following previous Cabinet reports that officers received approval to develop and consult on a Charnwood contribution strategy. This was to provide a suitable mechanism for collecting and pooling contributions from development that is part of Charnwood's emerging local plan. As has been set out before, the distribution of growth within their proposed local plan is a pattern of smaller developments dispersed over a wide geographical area. This presents some challenges in mitigating the cumulative impacts of growth, which by 2037, the Local Highway Authority considers to be severe. For reasons set out within the report, the Charnwood contribution strategy will now not be taken forward. Instead, Charnwood Borough Council have proposed to implement a SIL. Whilst we agree a SIL is an appropriate mechanism to use, it will take some time to implement, in the region of 12 to 18 months, and this gives rise to a number of issues for highways and transport and impacts and concerns for Local Highway Authority. This applies to the management of planning applications as well as development of the local plan. The reason for the supplementary report is to summarise the concerns over these aspects relating to the planning process, as demonstrated by the approval of planning applications at Charnwood Local Plans Committee on the 17th of October. In essence, the approval of relevant applications in the absence of a suitable mechanism for managing strategic transport impacts means that contributions are lost, with an associated financial impact on the Council. The recommendations on the order paper therefore include both those already set out in the main report and those introduced as part of the supplementary report, and include that Cabinet notes the recent developments in relation to the Charnwood Local Plan and the CTCS, the contribution strategy, including the implications for the Highway Authority, recent determination of planning applications against highways advice by Charnwood Borough Council Plans Committee, and recent correspondence between the two councils. That these concerns give rise to doubts over the delivery of the local plan and its soundness from a point of view of the Highway Authority. That the LHA, so us as the Local Highway Authority, will work with Charnwood to produce a SIL, but will also work to mitigate the impact of the interim period before the SIL is introduced and address the concerns set out in paragraphs 18 to 26 of the report. In addition, in light of the experience of working with Charnwood Borough Council on this local plan, the report sets out some principles to guide the Local Highway Authority in a future engagement with local planning authorities, in local plan development. And if it's okay, Chair, I will just touch on these as they're set out in the report. So these include that local planning authorities should keep their local development schedules schemes up to date to help us plan for resourcing and understand risks. The County Council will no longer offer conditional support of the local highway authority to the local plan at consultation stage based on the delivery of future work, where this is critical in the LHA's view to the plan's soundness. Support for local plans will only be explicit where the draft has sufficient policies to reflect the challenges of that plan, specific to highways and transport, and is based on a proportionate, complete evidence base. In order to receive support, the draft plan will also have to demonstrate that the impact on the highways and transport networks or requirements of highway and transport policy, so for instance, active and sustainable travel, arising from the distribution strategy have been identified, that what is required to facilitate the growth sustainably has been identified, and the plan includes an effective delivery plan with reasonable prospect of success. Where evidence demonstrates significant cumulative impacts arising from the plan growth, the appropriate delivery mechanism for infrastructure, easy for me to say, which is critical to the successful delivery of the plan growth, is the Community Infrastructure Levy, so CIL, which can be developed concurrently with the local plan if it is to receive the support of the County Council. Where sufficient viability has not been demonstrated via a CIL or appropriate prioritisation of funding has not taken place, the County Council will object to the plan on the basis that the growth cannot be delivered sustainably. In addition, active and sustainable travel modes need to be considered as part of the access strategy in the site selection process. Sites cannot be considered sustainable by the local highway authority where the only feasible travel choice to key services is by car, and provision for sustainable travel modes should be made part of the access strategy to avoid this being the case. And finally, where a plan has a significant portion of the sites allocated that are not accessible by sustainable travel modes without sufficient plans in place to provide either new services or appropriate links, this may give rise to an objection from the local highway authority. So that's a summary of the recommendations that are included on the order paper, Chair, in their entirety. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Ozzy, I'll move to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. As Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport, I know how concerned residents of Leicestershire are about the impact of growth on the highways and transport network. The local authority is attempting to ensure that as growth comes forward, the impacts are mitigated and the transport network is fit for purpose in the future. Not just for car journeys, but for sustainable modes too. We've worked really hard to get the best results we can for the residents of Charnwood. This is really important part of our work, and so we cannot ignore the issues raised in the report. I'm happy to move the recommendations that are accepted.
Thank you. I was going to say before I'll go to Christine just a second, and then I'll take questions. Thank you, James.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, and I'll come back with any comments I've got to make, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. James.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Joanna, for the report. Development is necessary in order to grow our area and homes for people and so forth. But and I think people generally speaking acknowledge and accept that. But where the problem comes is when the growth comes and the infrastructure doesn't match. And certainly in my area for years, decades, that has been the concern. In places like Quenenborough, for instance, where it's had huge development, it's grown in size exponentially in years, and it hasn't had the roads to match. Now you've got real problems in the centre, the crossroads, and all over the village. And that's just one example of many, many I could give you. Ultimately, the people in my division, and in fact across the entire county, rely on us as the highway authority to make that decision on their behalf to ensure that development that does come doesn't negatively impact them, doesn't make their transport worse, and doesn't make their communities worse. Therefore, I think ultimately, whilst we obviously want to be supportive to our partners and we want to enable the growth that is necessary, it has to be done in a sustainable way. And if we sort of nod through development that we don't believe is sustainable, that will negatively impact our communities, the ones who suffer are residents, and that's not what we're here for. We're here to protect them and to grow sustainably. So I support what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, James. Robert.
Yeah, it's really just to echo that and just say it is disappointing that we appear to be at this impasse, is I think the politest way of putting it. These problems aren't going to go away, and the biggest problem with the infrastructure, as we've seen over the past few years, is the prices have just skyrocketed. And if you don't actually sort this out, it's just going to exacerbate the problem that James talked about. The biggest complaint people have to development is the infrastructure is not there, and it puts more and more stress on the current infrastructure. So I think I fully support what we're doing. I think we have to be quite clear on this, because if we don't actually sort this out, all we're doing is creating a much, much bigger problem down the road.
Thank you, Robert. Christine, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I fully support what everybody else has said. I mean, if we don't get it right, then it's county that gets the blame for saying, well, you haven't got the roads in place, you haven't done this. But it needs to be done right at the beginning when the plans are put in, that we make sure all the highways and the infrastructure and what the other councillors have said is in place. Or else trying to get it done afterwards, I think, will be an impossibility. And then, like James has said, our residents then are going to suffer. So we really need to make it plain that we're not happy. We need to make sure that the infrastructure's there, or else we're going to get the blame.
Stephen Blake.
Yeah, I just want to echo some of the comments that have been made around the table, because from my experience, I think it's best that we work with planning authorities right at the beginning of the plan making process to ensure that the infrastructure and the funding of that infrastructure is in place. I do not think it is reasonable or possible to come on a case-by-case ad hoc basis to a planning committee and argue for certain infrastructure at that point in time and then expect the developer to fund that, because we'll be told quite rightly by the planning authority that we haven't got the evidence base at that point in time to support the arguments that we're making. So this is the only opportunity, frankly, where a highway authority such as the Leicestershire County Council has an opportunity to shape the infrastructure moving forward. Down the line, the planning decision-making process is largely down to the planning authority. So we have to get this part right. This is the plan making process, and we need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place and it's properly funded.
Okay, thank you, Blake. The item has been moved by Ozzy, and it's been seconded by Christine. I mean, my only point is that I think the motion in front of you does know it's been updated and it does reflect the current situation that we're in. So thanks to the officers for that. Is it agreed, members? Next item is agenda item 6, the draft Leicestershire and Rutland Suicide Prevention Strategy 2024 to 2029 on pages 389 to 460 of your agenda pack. The next report presents the draft refreshed Leicestershire and Rutland Suicide Prevention Strategy for 24 to 29 and seeks approval to launch a formal consultation for an 8-week period beginning on the 28th of October 2024. An update is also provided on the progress of work under the current strategy. Mike Sands, Director of Public Health, and Holly Hutchinson, Public Health Portfolio Principal, will present the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I start, so as the report says, the purpose of the report is to seek approval to launch the public consultation on our refreshed suicide prevention strategy for 2024 to 2029. As you were saying, I'll hand over to Holly in a second just to give an outline of the progress we've made in the last strategy and also to outline the priorities in this one. What I was going to say is, in relation to paragraph 4, you can see, if you ask the question, why do we need to do this? The answer is, well, we need to because it's a national must-do. But we do have a good history in Leicestershire in advance of the national requirement of treating suicide as a priority and doing some good work on suicide prevention, not least at the prompting of Mr. Rushton back in 2017 that led to us implementing the Start Conversation initiative across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So we have been doing this for some years. And then the other bit, I suppose, for me is, the question for me would be, well, why are we doing this on an LLR basis? Really, that's about the number of certainly L and R organisations that we work with on suicide prevention, notably the police, around joint work with them, particularly around the real-time data surveillance that we've put in place, and also, of course, the NHS with the ICB being on an LLR footprint. So I think there's a very good need to carry on the good work that we're doing, in addition to the sense of we need one because it's a national must-do. But if I can hand over to Holly, just to give a bit of a flavour for the content and the progress. So all yours.
Mike,
as the paper shows, our draft strategy is in line and also reflects the National Suicide Prevention Strategy, which was launched last year. However, it also reflects our local needs and was developed following a thorough data exercise using the best available data, which is highlighted in the report, as well as the best available evidence base. We also went through a thorough engagement exercise with professional stakeholders and experts with experience. And we are proposing that the strategy spans a 5-year time period with an action plan that will be developed to support the implementation of the strategy and address the priority areas which are outlined within the strategy. There are key high-risk groups and high-risk factors which, through the development of the draft refresh strategy, we are looking to address, such as those who self-harm, those bereaved by suicide, and children and young people. And our mission is to prevent suicide and save lives. As Mike said, we're building on some good work that is already taking place, and through the existing suicide prevention strategy, of which some of our achievements include development and local delivery of the LLR self-harm service, expansion of the Tomorrow Project, which is a project to support those bereaved by suicide, further development of the Start a Conversation programme and launch of the e-learning, establishment of the Suicide Lived Experience Network, and as Mike mentioned, our close partnership working with Leicestershire Police on the real-time suspected suicide surveillance data. And that has allowed us to establish working groups which are looking closely at the data, high-risk locations and communications and media approaches. We want to continue to do more to support people and also ensure that suicide isn't inevitable. Our refreshed draft strategy is based on collaboration with those who work within the field of suicide prevention and also with those who have experience of suicide and mental health challenges. And engagement was pivotal in deciding the draft priorities, the guiding principles, as well as the key messages, which are highlighted within the report and also within the strategy. The strategy will be presented at the relevant health scrutiny meetings for each area and each health and wellbeing board. And the consultation will comprise of an online survey and focus groups with those that took part in the engagement sessions. And there's also a communications plan in place. So the ask is for Cabinet to approve the 8-week consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. In Louisa's absence from the room and as former lead member for health, I'm more than happy to move the motion on the order paper today. I read it. It's a good report. It's a practical and sensible strategy, and it continues the good work we've done. So happy to move the motion on the order paper. Christine.
Yeah, I'm happy to second it. And as Lee's just said, that we're following on from the good work that we've already been doing. And I just say carry on with it. Thank you.
Nick.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. I didn't intend to speak, but Mike kindly mentioned me. So I think Leicestershire has got a lot to be proud of with this. I know that I formally introduced in 2017, but in all honesty, it's had the cross-party support of everybody for the 7 years, and it is exceedingly important. If it's not just saving the life of the person who attempts to commit suicide, it's the effect that the person that commits suicide has on the entire family and above and beyond the family. So I'm kind of proud that Leicestershire was ahead of the game. I'm kind of proud of the work we've done. I'm kind of proud again that we're going to continue with it, even though it's now government policy, so they're probably copying us. And I think it's even more important that we have a good strategy going forward, because don't forget we've got the so-called euthanasia bill coming up, which will in a way blur some of the edges. So I think it's very, very important that we do it, and I'm sure you've given some consideration to what may or may not be the outcome of that. I mean, I've got my views. They're not for today, but it certainly needs bearing in mind, doesn't it, Holly, Mike? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So we have a proposal and a second. Can I ask for a show of hands, all those in favour? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is agenda item 7, the East Midlands Development Company Limited, pages 461 to 466. Sorry. The next report recommends that as a member authority and part owner of the East Midlands Development Company, the County Council supports the board of the company to take the necessary steps to dissolve the company. John Sinnott, Chief Executive, and Lauren Haslam, our Director of Law and Governance, will present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this need only be a short introduction. As paragraph 6 shows, we paused our engagement with the company in May 2022 because of concerns around its management and governance, concerns which since then have either been ignored or rejected. So we got to a position where, with the establishment of the Freeport, the cancellation of HS2 beyond Parkway, and the lack of any interest from the combined authority in the future of the DevCo, it is an organisation without a role, without any ongoing funding. So in the circumstances, its voluntary dissolution can be recommended, which is reflected in the recommendation on the order paper.
Okay, thank you. Lauren?
Yes, just simply to add, we've got good and constructive progress in relation to the arrangements to move towards dissolution. And importantly, I think from the County Council's perspective, in relation to the production of information that's held by the DevCo, which may be of relevance to both this authority as a member of the Freeport, but also to the Freeport generally. So I think that's a positive position to be in at this stage in the process of dissolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to move the motion on the order paper. I've got nothing further to add than what John and Lauren have said. Probably about time. Seconded by Mr. Ashman. Robert.
Yeah, I just echo what you said. Rather than this limping on for any longer, I think it's good that it's draw a line under it and move on.
Okay, thank you. Is everyone in agreement? Thank you for that. Next agenda item is item 8. Items referred to from overview and scrutiny. There aren't any. Item 9, any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent. As mentioned earlier, we have one urgent item, a report on the Leicestershire County Council Lead Local Flood Authority Protocol. And I'm going to ask Jana Walker, our Assistant Director of Environment and Transport, to present the item, and I'll then ask Ozzy to speak as lead member. Thank you. Thank you, Jana.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to clarify roles and responsibilities of the Lead Local Flood Authority after reports suggest there may be some misunderstanding in communication shared by district councils following recent flood events in September and October 2024. The County Council's Lead Local Flood Authority has worked to provide information to all stakeholders, including publishing a new flood risk management strategy approved by this Cabinet in February 2024. At the time of publication, the Council recognised the complexities of flood risk management duties and is delivering on the Be Flood Ready, Aware, Prepared and Engaged messaging set out within the strategy, including developing a public-facing website to help share more information. However, it's clear more needs to be done, as there appears to be recent examples of representatives of district councils misreporting or miscommunicating on the role of the Lead Local Flood Authority in respect to flood events. The role of the Lead Local Flood Authority is set out in paragraphs 29 to 30 of the report. Just to give an overview of some of the key functions of the Lead Local Flood Authority: lead in managing local flood risk, including chairing Leicestershire's Flood Risk Management Board. We prepare and maintain a local flood risk management strategy. We maintain a register of assets that have significant impact on local flood risk. We investigate significant local flooding events, identifying responsible bodies, and publish the results of investigations. You may be familiar with these from your areas. They're known as Section 19 investigations. We issue consents for altering, removing, and replacing certain structures and features on ordinary water courses. We undertake a statutory consultee role, providing technical advice on surface water drainage to local planning authorities. This is for major developments over 10 dwellings. We cooperate with all other risk management authorities to help coordinate local flood risk management, and we play a lead role in emergency planning and recovery after a flood event. Local authorities are Category 1 responders under the Civil Contingencies Act and must have plans to respond to emergencies and control or reduce the impact of an emergency. As you see, included in the list of responsibilities is the role of statutory consultee in the planning process. This has been another area of recent confusion. Some district councils expecting that the LFA's role, so the Lead Local Flood Authority's role, in respect of responding to major planning applications would also extend to commenting and advising on minor planning applications. Conversely, in other instances, our advice as LLFA, so the Lead Local Flood Authority, have not been fully captured or included, and there are occurrences where we have not been reconsulted on changes to applications by the planning authority. So in recognition of these issues highlighted in the report, as part of the recommendations, it's proposed to develop a protocol for how the lead local flood authority will work with district councils on the management of flood risk. And amongst other things, we expect this will cover defining roles and responsibilities very clearly, setting out what the established flood risk management meetings and groups in place are and what they're for, defining the offer from the lead local flood authority to support district councils. It will incorporate an agreed communications protocol as well. The report also contains an update on other relevant issues, including highway gully emptying, which of course has been a concern to residents in light of the local recent weather events. And the recommendations, though, are as per the order paper.
Thank you, Julian. I think the paper is very timely and very appropriate in the current circumstances. So, Ozzy.
Thank you. I also think it's very timely and very appropriate. And I think it's upon district councils to actually listen to the flood advice that this council gives to them when they're doing planning applications. And I wholeheartedly support what the report says and what the officers do. People don't realise what work our flooding team do. They're a tremendous help to society and to Leicestershire. It's a very, very small team of dedicated officers that work around the clock to deal with flooding events. We've had many events this year. We started with Hurricane Henk, and then we've had the latest ones over the last month, which has flooded my area, which I live in, and houses as well, and business properties. It flooded other areas. We've worked tirelessly to do the right thing for our communities, and we need to make sure that at the planning stages that the evidence is listened to, because we don't want this to happen in the future on new developments. So I wholeheartedly recommend the report.
Thank you, Ozzy. Blake.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll formally second the report, but I've actually spoken at Cabinet previously when I did Ozzy's job as lead member, and the government introduced the new provisions for lead local flood authorities. And I said one of the problems with the policy framework at that point in time is that it didn't have any teeth. It didn't allow the county council actually to enforce some of the investigations and the work that needs to be done. We're a coordinator. So it's pretty disappointing that this misinformation is actually happening. We're many years down the line now. And I think, to be frank, as an elected member, I can envisage, and certainly I have some first-hand experience of this, where in some cases an episode will happen, a flooding episode. It will decimate and be very problematic for particular communities. And local elected members want to respond to that. They know they have some form of responsibility, and the authority they're elected to has some form of accountability. But I think the easy out, particularly maybe for local members, is to say, well, it's another authority's problem. It's another authority's fault. They must sort this problem. The truth is we have to work together under this current policy framework. And actually, I welcome the intervention from the most promising, most recent Leicestershire MP, Mr. Peter Bedford, in the Houses of Parliament. He made a point that actually we do not have enough resource or powers to discharge our duties properly. And he made that very recently in the Houses of Parliament. So I welcome that intervention that he made. I think I support him in that. And I'd certainly support this protocol where we define the responsibilities of the authorities, and hopefully that will lead to less misinformation being bandied about in our communities.
Thank you, Blake. Christine.
Yeah, I noted that you did say that any alterations to the planning applications, that they come back to us, because quite often the alterations could make quite a big difference of what we would have commented on in the first place about the flooding. And of course, you've got to take into account sometimes the other developments that are coming on that could affect the development that's being looked at. So it is, an awful situation in some places, but the planning authorities have really got to take on board about some of these flooding areas. I know in my area that it said it's not flooded in 100 years. Well, how come in the last year we've had 100 floods, over the last year? So something's got to be done and sorted, because we as a council get the blame on a lot of things when it's not always our fault. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Christine. James.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to just repeat some what Christine's just said there, actually, I think it's vital that the development, the borough councils and districts do take into account the Lead Flood Authority advice on developments, because in my patch, flooding is a big issue in my patch, and it's just along with the transport we talked about before, one of the big things that people talk about is the impact on flooding. Now, the answer you get always from the planning authority is that the rules require balancing ponds and so forth to mitigate and so forth. But as Christine has said, you know, the fact is we've seen flooding increase in areas downstream from places where developments have happened, and my residents are saying that isn't a coincidence. And frankly, I have to agree. I can only say what I see in that regard. So I think it's very important that the flood authority advice is taken into account, fully on board by the districts when planning doing the applications. But in addition, I think it's a good thing that we are clarifying our position versus district position versus others' positions with the authorities. But as an extension of that, I think it would be useful if we could to have a as simple as possible version for residents as well. Again, when flooding happens, and it happens badly and regularly in my patch, people get confused rightly between who does what. Is it Severn Trent? Is it the Environment Agency? Is it us? Borough Council? You have to go to Charnwood for some, and people get confused. And I think if we were to sort of have a handy, as simple as possible, and I appreciate it's a complex sort of thing, where people can understand who does what, why, and when, that would certainly be useful in my patch, and that's something I would be very willing to get out to residents.
Thank you, James. I think you've heard the urgency required. So it's yes, look forward to getting the protocol updated and completed. Moved by Ozzy, seconded by Blake. All in favour? Thank you. Item 10, exclusion of the press and public. That brings the public part of the meeting to a close. Thank you to those online for attending. I now move under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 that the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 10 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is everyone agreed? Okay, thank you.